Took the Hebrews to go through the wilderness.
Okay. Dear Father, as we come together, we give you thanks for this ability to be able to study together and learn more of your precious word. As we go over these things that we've heard and read many, many times, keep our minds open for our understanding so that even though we have gone through this before, new things will pop up so that we can even be strengthened more in the way that you wish us to be. As we do open these meetings, we ask that you be with our speaker so that we may have our eyes, ears opened in order to understand in our own way those things necessary for you to allow us into your kingdom. It is through your Son, Jesus, we give you thanks for this meeting, and we open these at this time. Amen.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Glad you're here tonight. Good to see all of you. And this is a whole series. We're, I think, week 5 into this. Women of influence. And it ties women of the past to women of today. And that bridge is influence. A lot of people have distanced themselves from women of the past, saying, oh, they couldn't vote, couldn't own property, they couldn't get an education, they were just chattel. I've tried to prove very carefully, very deliberately, that women in Jewish culture only, and only when they were following the law, enjoyed more liberty, more freedom, more power, more succession than women in any other culture. When women in Israel were treated poorly, when they were treated badly, it was because the children of Israel had done what?
Bad things.
They left God.
Yeah.
They stopped following his law. The point is that God's law protected women and gave them more freedoms and more liberty than man's law ever did. So we're now looking at this chapter about the influence over inheritance. I can confidently say it is the women all the way through scripture, not the men, who are more concerned about securing, nailing down, making sure it's absolutely perfect and there's not a T not crossed or an I not dotted over an inheritance. We have seen it with Sarah. She did what? To make sure her son Isaac's inheritance was not compromised. What did Sarah do?
Sent Hagar and Ishmael packing.
She sent Hagar and Ishmael packing, and even after her death, what did that legacy lead to with Keturah and all 5 of her children?
They received gifts, but they did not get the inheritance.
Right, and God and Abraham sent them far, far away. To Kamchatka, he sent them as far away as he could from his son because he did not want them to compromise the inheritance. Then we get to Rebecca. She never got to meet Sarah, but I guarantee you they share this in common. What did she do to secure Jacob's inheritance? We studied this last week.
Made sure that he got the blessing from his father.
Say it one more time.
And Esau.
Yeah, he dressed up like his brother by his mother's orders, brought the favorite dish in, dressed up like his brother, even put goat hair on his neck and his hands and arms so he would smell, look, and feel, but not sound like Esau. And it was incredible because she suffered probably wrath from her husband over this. Certainly she suffered threats from Esau himself. It was a very dark situation. So then we've gotten to Akshaw, who did an incredible job of securing her inheritance. And her name means ankle chain or anklet. And Akshaw was the prize to the man for defeating Kiriath Sefer for Caleb. And it was his younger relation, Othniel, who was Caleb's younger brother's son, I guess. So he was a nephew, I guess. And Othniel married Aksha, which was a cousin. So, but the important thing is what she did. And this is recorded in Joshua 15. And it's really important to realize securing this inheritance was everything. We may look at it as an ask, but it was an ask for all time. Because the unfortunate great-great-grandchildren of this family is Nabal, he was very rich, and he got rich because of what she asked for way back when. So I'm gonna get a reader for Joshua 15.
Yeah. Nancy, is that good enough size for you there?
I'm sorry, did you say Nancy?
Yes, ma'am. Is that big
Okay.
enough for you to read?
All right. Joshua 15. Achsah asked for the springs from her father Caleb, in accordance with the Lord's command to him. Joshua gave to Caleb, son of Jephunneh, a portion in Judah. Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. Arba was the forefather of Anak. From Hebron, Caleb drove out the three Anakites, Seshai, Aaman, and Talmai, descendant of Anak. From there, he marched against the people living in Debir, formerly called Kirlath Sefer. And Caleb said, I will give my daughter Achsah in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Sefer. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, took it. So Caleb gave his daughter Achsah to him in marriage. One day when she came to Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field. When she got off her donkey, Caleb asked her, what can I do for you? She replied, do me a special favor. Since you have given me land in the Negev, give me also springs of water. So Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. Thanks for that. That had a lot of very difficult words. I hope
That it has a tenacious woman in it who will not stop until she gets everything secured. So from Caleb, she not only asked for the specific piece of land, but then she goes after it again and says, what good is this land without water? And she's so right. We don't have that experience in Virginia because there's water everywhere. But out west, it is a constant fight for water. Every town, every city, every municipality has lawyers that pore over the text, ancient text in American history to see who has the right water rights to what exists. If you don't believe me, there's an excellent book out there. It's called Cadillac Desert. I got several other people to read it and they were blown away. It follows the destiny of American history with Manifest Destiny going west and saying we will turn this desert land out west into the Garden of Eden. How? We're going to dam up every river out west. So it follows two federal agencies, the Bureau of Land Management and the Army Corps of Engineers. Together, these two massive organizations, and I want you to wait for this, built 50,000 dams all over the American West, all to try to turn it into the Garden of Eden, which they could not do. So Aksha here is trying to make sure her land has enough water to be fruitful, and that's why she comes to her father, I guess, to ask for this. All right. Our next one is Bathsheba, and it's reminding the king of a promise. I think we started this last week.
Yes, I think we read that.
So in this one, Bathsheba is approached first by Nathan, and he's the one who rebuked David for what he did. And basically says, Bathsheba, you need to act now. You need to go in and talk to the king, who is very aged. He's basically in sort of his deathbed. And he's like, have you heard that Adonijah, son of Haggith, is gonna become the king without the king knowing it? So she says, you go in there and tell him what's going on, and then I'm gonna follow up behind you and say the same thing. And then we're going to secure the throne ship for your son, Solomon. And so she comes in there, and Abishag the Shunammite's tending to David. And he asks what she wants, and she says, didn't you swear to me that my son was going to be the king? And basically she warns him, if he doesn't become king, both Bathsheba and Solomon will be fugitives from justice, on the run, having to leave to move to a foreign country, or worse yet, just assassinated to secure the throne. You may remember this woman's name, Athaliah. What did she do to secure the throne for herself? What did Queen Athaliah do to secure the throne for herself?
She killed all the sons of Ahab.
Yeah, she killed all the sons.
Killed her grandchildren. She killed all of her grandchildren except for Josiah. Can you imagine? Nice grandma coming over for a cookie and she kills them all. Like, unbelievable.
He hid.
I'm sorry?
That's because he hid.
Oh, well, he didn't even have a choice. He was hidden by
Yeah, the nurse hid him.
Jehoiada the priest, and more importantly, his aunt,
Yep.
Jochebed, is that right? Anyway, she's a descendant. That's the weird one. She's a descendant of royalty and of the priesthood, I believe. So that was pretty interesting. But in this case, she does this marvelous job, and it was in none too late of a moment that she does this. So I want you to see, so far we have looked at 5 examples, I believe. Sarah, we have looked at Rebecca, we have looked at Akshah, we have looked at Bathsheba, so I guess we've only done 4. And we're looking at all these things. What are we seeing as a common denominator? The sinew thread that ties them all together. Between these 4 women, yes.
Women ensuring for their generations of futures for their children.
Absolutely, a livelihood, a possibility of survival. And what is the commonality between all the men in all these stories?
They're all-
Abraham, Isaac, Othniel, and David.
They're all men of God.
It's
They
true.
they all follow what their women say.
That's true too, but I guess the thing I was looking at is none of them really knew what was going on in their own household. And they kind of depended on their wives to be their eyes and ears as to what was really happening. So it's certainly true with Abraham, and it's certainly true with Isaac. You know, he says his eyes were very dim, and he was also favoring the wrong son. Othniel is pretty present and accounted for, but David is at the end of his life, and he certainly does not know what's going on in his family. So Bathsheba is there to raise the awareness with him. All right, I will go on to, who's our next reader? If I know it's a small font. Walter, who's our next reader?
We did that one last week.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll continue. I'm sorry.
That's why I was waiting for you to go. I'm like, oh,
Okay, all right.
I'm sorry.
So, I just wanted to get to those commonalities. So now we're gonna see one of the real bedrocks of women's influence over inheritance. And there's 5 of them, the 5 daughters of Zelophahad, Malklah, Noah, Hoglah, Tisra, and Malkah. And their names mean disease, motion, partridge, queen, and favorable. Quite interesting. I don't know whether they were born at different epidemics during along the path that they went, but partridge I think is the same as quail. Favorable. I just think they're interesting. It'd be nice to tie their names back to when different occurrences happened in the Exodus. But this one, they actually changed the law. it also bears something in common with Sarah's request of Abraham. So I want you to see if you can pick that up, and I don't have to fill you in on the clue, but there's a big clue there. So who's our next reader for Numbers 26?
David, we got a perfect font for you.
Okay, Numbers 26, 32 through 34. So, excuse me, through Semitic and the Semitite clan, through Helfer, the Helferite clan, Zelophahad, son of Hefner, Hefter, had no sons. He had only daughters, whose names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglish, Milcah, and Tyrus. These were the clans of Manasseh. Those numbered were 52,700.
Yeah, so it's a huge clan. It's very large. And these 5 daughters of Zelophahad had no brothers. Their father's dead. The situation's quite grim because they need to know, are we going to be given a piece of land when we get in this land? Because our dad's dead. We're going to come into the land and we're not even going to be considered unless somebody steps in and does something. And let me ask you this. Did what the 5 daughters of Zelophahad changed in the law, their request of God and of Moses, did it apply to just them at the end of all of this?
Mhm. Yeah.
It would have applied to the entire nation. At this point, probably close to 3 million people, half of those women. So let's see what happens.
All right, let me get to my next.
All right,
All right.
it's covering up half of my slide. It's just driving me crazy.
What is?
I want this tab to go away. I can't even see all the words.
Let me see.
Ah. I'm sorry, guys. I apologize. Did it just pull it out? Did we lose everybody?
No, we'll have it fixed in just a second.
Sorry.
Let's see, makes me everybody still happy. Hold on a minute for a second, everybody. All right.
We could go ahead and get somebody to read this. While we're checking my slide, it's just covering everything up. Who's our next reader?
Our next reader is Fonda, please.
Fonda, can you read Numbers 27?
Okay.
Thank
The
you.
daughters of
Zelophahad.
Zelophahad, son of Epher, the son of Gilead, the son of Maker, the son of Manasseh, belonged to the clan of Manasseh, son of Joseph. The names of the daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tiras. They approached the entrance to the tent of the meeting and stood before Moses. Eleazar, the priest, the leaders, and the whole assembly, and said, "Our father died in the desert. He was not among Korah's followers who banded together against the Lord, but he died for his own sin and left no sons. Why should our father's name disappear from the clan because he had no sons? Give us property among our father's relatives." So Moses brought their case before the Lord, and the Lord said to him, "What Zelophehad's daughters are saying is right. You must certainly give them property as an inheritance among their father's relatives and turn their inheritance over to his daughter. If he has no daughter, give his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, give his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father had no brothers, give his inheritance to the nearest relative in his clan, that he may possess it. This is to be a legal requirement for the Israelites, as the Lord commanded Moses."
Thank you, Fonda. So their case is a very interesting one. They bring it to Moses and the entire assemblies, including Eleazar the priest and Moses. So they come to them and they say, look, let's first establish our dad, Zelophahad, had nothing to do with Korah's rebellion. Why would it be important to establish that at the outset?
Because they had no part in Israel.
Right. Because they were part of that rebellion, they didn't inherit. So they need to differentiate themselves from that. And they says he died for his own sins, okay? So he's gone. But we want to establish the fact that we deserve property because he didn't have any sons, or that because he had no sons, we should be given property. So what's interesting is Moses takes this case. He doesn't decide it himself. He doesn't say, no, that's not a good idea. He takes it to God, and what does God say? What the daughters of Zelophahad said is right.
Yeah. Right.
And they should inherit land along with the rest of them. So that kind of means you have the whole Mosaic law in all of its particulars, and now added to that is going to be the ruling by God on behalf of Zelophahad's daughters. And so this wouldn't have just had deep meaning for them, but also for any woman in Israel. You know, there's lots of families that just have daughters. So what happens to their land?
Right.
So it's really important. And God says at the end of this is to be a legal requirement for the Israelites as the Lord commanded Moses. So my question to you is, what is the sinew of connection between Sarah and what she did to protect her inheritance with the daughters of Zelophahad? There's a connection between the two.
They pled their case in front of a,
With Sarah, she just told her husband to get rid of Hagar and his wife. They're not going to have any place with my son anymore. It's a big one. It's not a small issue. It's not a small thing. In both the case of Sarah and in the cases of the 5 daughters of Zelophahad, God answers, Abraham, Sarah's right, do what she said. And in this case, he goes back to Moses and Eleazar and says, what the 5 daughters of Zelophahad said is right. Enact it, execute it, follow it. So that's a big thing, you know, that these two cases that involve 6 different women, they were so absolutely zealous to protect the inheritance of their children. And I'm talking not just material possessions, but the spiritual aspects as well. My grandmother always used to say, she's like, I can't leave you material inheritance. Mine is going to be a spiritual inheritance. And I love that. I'm glad that she said that because it's richer than anything else she could have left. Yes, Walter.
Correct me if I don't remember this right, but this is the base, the foundation, so that in many years, a woman by the name of Naomi will come about and say, hey, you need to get this piece of property. But he says, I am not your nearest kin, as the law was established here.
Right.
And so they had to wait for it to work out.
Absolutely.
So it's beginnings of all that stuff.
I think that's a great point, Walter, because it is the grassroots movements of it all come right out of Numbers 27 and go right to the Ruth chapter. But our story does not end here. What would be the next question to ask once they get in the land? And the 5 daughters of Zelophahad do get their deed for their piece of property. What is going to be the next question?
how to maintain it,
By what?
farming or
Well,
Keeping
how do,
it,
how do you
keeping
keep it through time?
Yeah, how it's inherited.
Oh,
from
they
that-
had to get married and have kids.
Or whatever.
Well, but who do they marry?
But they have to marry within their tribe.
That's it. That's what we're looking
So
for.
they have to
So
stay within Manasseh.
they can't go marry, someone from another nation.
Right.
They can't marry anyone from who's even Jewish. They have to marry within their own tribe, which is pretty amazing. So we're gonna look at that next. And this is in Numbers 36. So we're way down the line. And I want you to see who brings the case forward this time. So can I get a reader for Numbers 36?
Okay.
It's Gilead and Maker and Manasseh. Trying to see if there's any other tricky names in here. I think the rest of it's pretty clear. Zelophahad, obviously. Okay,
All right, Joanne, it's your chance to take on this lovely set of names.
it's not that much. It's only 5 and I read them all. Gilead, Maker, Manasseh, Zelophahad.
Okay. The family heads of the clan of Gilead, son of Maker, the son of Manasseh, who were from the clans of the descendants of Joseph, came and spoke before Moses and the leaders, the heads of the Israelite families. They said, when the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land and an inheritance to the Israelites by lot, he ordered you to give the inheritance to our brother Zelophahad and his daughters. Now, suppose they marry men from other Israelite tribes, then their inheritance will be taken from the ancestral inheritance and added to that of the tribe they marry into. And so part of the inheritance allotted us will be taken away. When the year of the Jubilee for the Israelite comes, their inheritance will be added to that tribe into which they marry, and their property will be taken from the tribal inheritance of our forefathers.
So they finally thought all this up. So who's presenting this? The 5 daughters of Zelophahad?
Mhm.
No. It is the tribal leaders of Manasseh.
Yeah.
So now this has reached a new level of visibility. And they're like, okay, what do we do now? We got a lot of single women here in Manasseh, and it's a big tribe, over 55,000. So they're like, let's talk about this. If they have property and they marry, what happens when they marry?
Mhm.
Does the deed go outside to when their children inherit it? Does it go outside to another tribe? If they marry a Simeonite, if they marry somebody from Naphtali, somebody from Dan, what happens? So now it's got real serious, and the men are taking the women's case forward, which I think is interesting. And they're also very worried about that 49th year, the year of Jubilee,
Mhm.
when the land defects back to whoever owned it before. Okay, so when you bought land in Jewish culture, what are you actually paying for?
You're leasing it, so to speak.
You're leasing it for the years of harvest left.
Yeah.
So if you buy it 2 years before the year of Jubilee, you're going to buy it cheap because you're only getting 2 harvests out of it. If you buy it right after the year of Jubilee, you're paying for 49 harvests.
Wow.
Okay?
Yes.
49, that's what the land is worth, what it will yield.
Right.
But you also have to subtract every 7th year, you had to let the ground grow fallow.
Right.
So you subtract 7 from 49, and you're only getting 42 yields in that amount of time. So just to make it very clear, when you buy land and sell land, it's because of its property value, it's for its harvest of yield, except if it's in a city. Then there isn't any harvest. You're just buying the actual land. So in this case, they want to make sure their land is not going to be compromised, and Manasseh got 2 huge chunks of land,
Right.
one on the one side of the Jordan and one on the other side of the Jordan. So
And you're especially interested how many big springs and waters are on those properties. You don't want a big giant spring going off to somebody else. Like, wouldn't matter how yieldable your land around is because you would have no water for it.
So again, Moses takes this to them, and the Lord gives his answer to the descendants of Zelophahad's 5 daughters through the tribe of Joseph to the tribe of Manasseh. So do we have another reader for the rest of this?
Yes. Carrie, would you like to read for us?
I would love to. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Then at the Lord's command, Moses gave this order to the Israelites. What the tribe of the descendants of Joseph is saying is right. This is what the Lord commands for Zelophahad's daughters. This may marry, sorry, you say it for me. They may marry anyone they please as long as they marry within the tribal clan of their father. No inheritance in Israel is to pass from tribe to tribe, for every Israelite shall keep the tribal land inherited from his forefathers. Every daughter who inherits his land in the Israelite tribe must marry someone in her father's tribal clan, so that every Israelite will possess the inheritance of his fathers. No inheritance may pass from tribe to tribe, for each Israelite tribe is to keep the land it inherits. So Zelophahad's daughters did as the Lord commanded Moses. Zelophahad's daughters, all 5 of them, and Noah married their cousins on their father's side. They married within the clans of the descendants of Manasseh, son of Joseph. Manasseh, thank you, son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in their father's clan and tribe. These are the commands and regulations the Lord gave through Moses to the Israelites on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho.
So if a woman said, you know, she's from the tribe of Manasseh, and she's like, that guy over from the tribe of Dan, he looks pretty cute. What is her father gonna tell her? He ain't that cute. You are not marrying outside the tribe because you're gonna lose your land if you tried. But God prevented this from happening. Otherwise, every tribal piece of land would look like Swiss cheese, because every time somebody married, the land deeds would go traipsing off to whatever tribal owners had it. So it's very important that God once again confirms, yes, this is what's supposed to happen. And Zelophahad's 5 daughters were the ones who changed Mosaic law. And that's Millah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noah. So those 5 women are to be credited. They're specifically named. They're not just the 5 daughters of Zelophahad, even if nobody can say the father's name or the daughter's names. But anyway.
I thought Noah was usually a boy's name.
It is here. It's applied to a woman. So then we
Women are always stealing guys' good names.
anyway. So here's our next one, which I think is really phenomenal, and I think we have enough time to cover her before the end. What time do you have, Will?
It's only 7:30.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Oh. So here we have the one to me that kind of represents the zenith of looking after your children's inheritance. All the ones that came before were looking after what kind of an inheritance?
Property.
Property, exactly. Now we're talking about Salome, the mother of the sons of Zebedee. She's looking for something beyond this. What is she looking for?
The kingdom of heaven.
The future.
Yeah.
Will my 2 sons sit on your right and your left in the kingdom? That's how it's wonderful that she has this spiritual vision, that she wants her children to have this spiritual inheritance. I can't say enough how remarkable this is, because all the other women were very jealous to make sure the inheritance came for this life. But the sons of Zebedee were lucky to have this kind of a mother that wanted to secure their eternal inheritance. Not for 70 years, but for all time. So can we look at Matthew chapter 20, where we got a reader for Salome, mother of the sons of Zebedee. Everybody hear Zebedee? Everybody hear Salome?
I'm going to assume that Lisa and Lynn still don't want to read. If I'm wrong, tell me now. Otherwise, it's Neil's turn to read, please.
Okay, Matthew 20, a mother's request. The mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her son and kneeled down and asked a favor of him. What is it you want? He asked. She said, grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink from the cup I'm going to drink? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit on my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those to whom they have been prepared by my Father. When the 10 heard of this, they were indignant with the two brothers. Jesus called them together and said, you know the rules of the Gentile Lord. The Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Indeed, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Many. Okay, great.
He's fading.
Yeah, so in this place, we have the mother of James and John coming up and asking Jesus for a grant. And she says, I would like to ask that my two sons sit at your right and left in your kingdom. And he's like, are you prepared to drink of the cup of martyrdom, the cup of terror, the cup of violence that I am going to have to drink of? And they're like, yeah, we're ready. Which doesn't sound very convincing. He says, all right, you are going to drink of that, but it's not really for me to grant. It's at the request of my Father who sits at my right and my left. And I think you actually see the answer to that at Transfiguration. It's Moses and Elijah who backed him up and stood behind him the entire time during their life. So what I want you to see that's good about this is that she has this vision for her children to secure their future inheritance in the kingdom. How many of you, as mothers online and in the room, pray for the future spiritual inheritance of your children? And what do you ask for? I'm asking, what do you ask for from the Lord for their spiritual inheritance?
I ask that the Lord works with them in their life, bring them to Him so that they will be accepting and be baptized, and of course be inheritance in the kingdom.
Excellent. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's a lifelong prayer, really, Patsy. I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't, they're just born. It's all the way through their lives.
Not just the
mothers
moment.
constantly.
Yeah.
And I pray for my children, for my grandchildren, and for the other children of those of us at meeting that, have children that are no longer attending.
It's a tough sell, and it's any denomination.
Mm-hmm.
Half of those raised in faith leave. I mean, it's a staggering statistic. I'm like, they're brought up. We're told in Proverbs, raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. Well, we got lots departing from it, even though they were brought up in it. So does anybody else want to share how they pray for the spiritual heritage and inheritance of their children?
I would have to agree with Patsy along the lines of that, we always pray that our children, grandchildren will accept Christ as their savior, and that, they will live the lives that they should live. So I would assume that's what all we mothers want for our children.
Yeah, because that's the most important thing, is their spiritual inheritance, obviously.
And fathers too.
And fathers too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, they were specifically talking about women here, but
I know.
if any of the fathers wanna talk about how they've prayed for their children and their spiritual inheritance, I'd love to hear it.
Same thing.
Yeah.
I say it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Always prayed that God would be with
God.
my son and that he would give him the strength to remain in the truth.
Good, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because there's darkness outside. I think so long to move on. So Peter had his miraculous escape from prison, and it was about that time that Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. Then he saw that it pleased the Jews. He proceeded to seize Peter also. So in that moment, he had one of the brothers put to death in Acts. So they did go through this. And then John, the other brother, had this revelation on the island of Patmos, and Christ spoke to him about the foreshadowing of what was coming. And Revelations chapter 1, verses 17 to 18. Then I saw and fell at his feet, though dead. And he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one, the dead. And behold, I am alive and will forever and ever. And I hold the keys to death and Hades." And think about it, whether they sat on the right or the left of Christ, David rightly said, "Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 years anywhere else. I would rather be the doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked." So he's putting it all in perspective for us of what all this means, but I really think we do need to pray about our spiritual inheritance for ourselves, as well as our children, grandchildren, to ensure that they will have a spiritual inheritance. That it's not just for this lifetime, because that's what really matters. I just want to explain this one, that's why I read that one, So the conclusion is, what is your influence over your inheritance? And this is one of the passages that is so meaningful, and I bit overplayed it with this exaggeration of what's written on these hands and the eyes that are on it. But it comes from Deuteronomy chapter 11. So may I have a reader for Deuteronomy?
Patsy, it's your turn, please.
Deuteronomy 11:18. Fix those words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of on your children may be in the land that the Lord swore to give your forefathers, as many as the days that the heavens are above the earth.
Just cut off after the word many. We didn't hear any of the rest of it. Phew, that's weird.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yeah.
Yeah, it cut off after the word many, and we never heard the rest of it. I don't know why it's doing.
Funny, because we heard it.
I heard it.
Yeah.
We heard it.
Yeah. Well, it's just cutting in and out. We didn't hear it on this end.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Your internet.
I'm paying for the top level, 1,000 megabytes.
It's not you, it's the company. They're doing it to you.
Well, because they've been doing all this maintenance work.
Mhm.
It's cutting out constantly.
Yep.
Okay, so what did God want them to do as parents to ensure they protected the spiritual inheritance of their children, their great grandchildren, and their great great grandchildren. He says right here, this is your strategy. This is something that if you do it, it will be guaranteed, more or less. So what is he saying here in Deuteronomy chapter 11 that they should do?
Well, I think he's saying that they should incorporate it in all aspects of their life every day, so that your children will see you living your beliefs and talking about it and always having it in the forefront of everything you do.
Absolutely. You nailed it, Patsy. That's it. Is there any action where you can leave God out in Deuteronomy 11? Maybe while you're watching football on TV, or maybe while you're going to the movies, or
I've heard more Christians at football games than anywhere else. Please, Lord.
they're praying to the Lord that their team's gonna win. I think that's
Both sides.
spiritual. So there's I find this to be an infrequent occasion, even among household believers. And I'm very thankful that my parents, we read together and prayed together as a family every night. If that hadn't have happened, I doubt I would still be here. And if I hadn't had grandparents who spent hours trying to make sure we got to Bible schools, we got to gatherings, and read with us and prayed with us, I doubt it would have happened. So it takes a lot of spiritual influence to guarantee that spiritual inheritance. And I would stress it again, it's all of our responsibility. I would think, I would make a bold statement, I'm just as responsible for Patsy's grandson, so Noah, choosing the Lord as she is, because we are really brothers and sisters. That's why I love the one accord prayer on Monday that we had for Corey Barnes. He's all of our concern. He's not just the Barnes' concern. He's a member of the spiritual household. We should all feel the weight and gravity of that loss. So to me, it's very important for us to regard our spiritual family as part of our inheritance, and that it does matter. Like you. Something good? Yes, ma'am. Yes, Nancy.
Now, I was just gonna mention one thing after Patsy had spoken about, what she's saying about having everything, always teaching them and, having everything available to learn about God and Jesus. And one of the very important ways is to set an example, I think. If your children and grandchildren don't see you living the life that you're telling them about, I think it's not as influential.
Right. But I feel sorry because I know that there's a lot of people who have striven so hard to serve the Lord, to represent that at home and everywhere else, and their children still walk away from the Lord. And they feel horrible about it, they feel guilty about it, and they've done everything they can to instill it, and it still didn't happen. So I'm going to introduce this word, and I hope everybody will just bear with me for a minute. It's called primogeniture. So it's primogeniture. It's an old English word, and it's a term to ensure your children's inheritance. We can call it spirigeniture if you want to. I coin my own phrase here, which is that we want every child to get that spiritual inheritance. So primogeniture is a system of influence where the firstborn child inherits the parent's property, wealth, or title. The term comes from the Latin word meaning primo, meaning first, and geniture, meaning birth or generation. So what we want from this, and you hear it in a lot of different law systems, it talks about primogeniture. And we need to think about spirigeniture, how do we promote that we want every child not to be lost, every child to come to the Lord, to guarantee their inheritance in the kingdom of God. And that it's not a joke, it's not something, visceral, it is something that is going to come to pass. So can someone read question number 1 for me?
All right, it is Susie's turn, please.
And you can read all 3 questions. So read them and stop. So we can.
Conclusion, what is the influence over your inheritance? What can you do to ensure your children's inheritance in the kingdom of God?
Stop there, stop there, okay. You're gonna read each one, but I want everybody to answer number 1. So what can we do to ensure our children's inheritance into the kingdom of God? You can say your own tactic, you can say what you've tried, you can say whatever it is you think you've done. I don't have children, so I can't say.
Neither do I, so.
I think you take them to meeting and Bible schools and weekend meetings every chance you get. I think you study with them at home. We used to have a Bible study every morning and every evening, and it was good for me and it was good for them. So, you worry about your kids, but if you give them a good background, you at least have given them a choice.
Yep, absolutely. Does Betty or Eb want to talk about it, or anybody else? Or Fonda, or anyone? Tony, time to end the class.
Carrie, were you going to say something?
Sure, I'd love to. I chose to homeschool my children as well, so that my influence would be more important and beneficial, I was hoping, in giving them the inheritance of what I taught instead of what is being taught in the schools. Trying to pick who they associated with as well as what I taught at home. So it's more, I think it's just as important. Do you know who they're hanging out with, in a sense, right? Who their friends are, bringing their friends in as well.
And I really think that's remarkable, and I would say that was a huge sacrifice on your part to choose to do that.
I would think
hope.
it. Go ahead.
Because of the amount of time, and not you could have worked and made a lot of money, but instead you chose, this is what's most important, that my children have a spiritual inheritance, and I'm gonna be here to make sure that happens. And a lot of people don't make that choice anymore.
And then I chose curriculum that's centered on God. So everything came around with God in the center as well. So every chance we could, we used Colossians 3:16 and 17. Everything we do, I be doing to the Lord and not unto men, and teaching them everything that I could to show them how important God is. And why we
Absolutely.
serve him. And then teaching them to serve, I think it's important as well.
I do too.
Absolutely.
That's excellent, Carrie. So you made it spirigeniture in its newest form.
There you go.
So I'd say, so you keep your sanity. We can't ensure our children's inheritance. Only God can do that.
Right.
And so instead of taking that, and we know what we mean, but
Yeah.
the best thing you can do is say, what can I do to better give them a chance at this than anybody else? Like Carrie was saying, for us, like for Linda and I, was when children came along, she stopped working. I kept working. She stayed home and raised the children herself, so that some daycare didn't set the values and principles that our kids had. So that was one way we did it. Right. And I like the homeschooling. That's a great thing. I wish we could have done that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just want to make sure everybody had the opportunity to speak to this, because I know, there's a lot of experts in the room on this.
And then you have to pray
Yeah.
a lot every day, fervently. Right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, do you wanna read question number 2?
All right, Susie, question number 2, please.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you wanted me to read it. How can you get your husbands and children to cherish the inheritance of the Spirit over the inheritance of this world? And you know, when you're going through it, that's really hard because your children have friends and their friends are not raised like they are. And it's a big draw to be a part of a group of people. So I think you just have to talk about God all the time at home so they'll know that. I know I asked Keith one time, do your friends even know who you are? And he started laughing and I said, I'm not kidding. Do they know who you are? And you know, he knew he was different. He knew he couldn't be like they were.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question to ask, you know, do they know who you are spiritually? It's very different. And then, does anybody want to talk to number 2? Because you talk to a lot of parents who's like, how are your kids doing? Oh, they're doing great. They've got this education, they got a 6-figure, you know, salary, they got a home in Bethesda, they got, you know, a yacht, they've got this, they've got that. And if you dare to ask about the spiritual aspects, you're likely to get marked out of the room. You know, but if they're financially well, then they're well. And I'm like, we need to start looking at spiritual inheritance margin.
Well, not being a parent, but I think in general, you ingrain into your family, your morals, your values, and guidance to how to live your life a certain way. Whether it be like, you know, don't do drugs or don't become an alcoholic if you can help it, because sometimes that's hereditary. You know, things that just general stuff that you don't think about, like.
You're giving them the right tools and strategies to
Yeah.
overcome in the first place, so that they don't fall prey to all that. It was
Yeah.
great. Yep, I agree. Susie, you wanna read number 3?
Okay. What can you do to ensure primogeniture for each child to ensure and lock down their future in the Lord?
And Walter said this partially, you can't totally, but you can build a good foundation for them to